Let's go ahead and bring in Steiner Sports CEO, Brandon Steiner.
One of the country's top memorabilia moguls.
I have an unbelievable guest, Brandon Steiner.
Brandon's second to none.
Great guest. Love the voice. Love the history. Does such a great job. You recognize him from NFL games, hockey games. Just really, when you think about it, just gradually is now fallen into the mix of the great announcers of where we get our sports from. Kenny Albert. Welcome.
Great to be here, Brandon.
You're here for Bruce Beck's Academy, which he does a good job with the kids. I love the fact he gives back to the kids and shows them what it takes. Do you find yourself kind of laughing because you've now been a broadcaster for a while? Because I think sometimes the kids see the glamour and the fame, which is something we talk a lot about, the glamour, fame, but then what goes into getting to that point is got to be a lot of work.
Well, Bruce is one of the best, and I've spoken in his camps for a long time. I go to 3 or 4 of them every summer, and it's great to see the kids, and I feel like an old man at this point being around these kids who weren't even born when we started out, but I really enjoy talking to them about the preparation that goes into a broadcast and how I started back in the late 80s, early 90s, and you start to see some of these kids get jobs out of college, and it really it's a great accomplishment for them, but feels good that you spoke to them during their high school and college years, and then they go on to have their own careers.
Yeah, great. It does a good job. Do you feel like you hit maybe with a little bit of luck, just because of sports blowing up at the time, just when you're kind of just about getting into it? Because when your dad, your uncle were into it, right? I mean, there were not a lot of sports jobs, and they weren't that prestigious either. And then all of a sudden, it just blew up. And you were right at the right time, right place, or how'd you feel about that?
A little bit, especially when I was hired by Fox to do the NFL. Definitely right place at the right time when they got the contract from CBS and decided to hire some younger announcers. And Joe Buck and Tom Brenneman and myself were all hired in 1994, and we're all still there 25 years later. But if Rupert Murdoch doesn't come in and take the NFC contract away from CBS, none of us are doing football. None of us have
changed everything,
such a
really
prestigious job so soon. It really did. But I was very fortunate, grew up around my father and 2 uncles who were sportscasters, and really learned via osmosis. And I was never told you have to do this and get into sports or broadcasting, but I always loved it. I got a tape recorder from my parents for my 5th birthday, and I set up my room like a TV or radio studio. I had the TV, the bed in the middle, my desk, and I would announce games into the tape recorder from the age of 5 on. And I always joke that family functions, birthday dinners were the first. I felt like I was a part of the first all-sports radio station, listening to their stories. All-sports radio didn't exist until July 1st, 1987.
So the things you were hearing that your dad or uncles, they had a first-row view,
right?
And you were hearing that stuff wasn't talked about. What was really going on
at the time? They were involved with the Knicks, Rangers, Islanders, Nets, Mets, Jets,
and then the local news
as well.
Right.
So
you had it all covered.
Learned a lot via osmosis, and when I went to college, and I was very fortunate in high school, growing up on Long Island. Cox Cable in Great Neck came to my high school to videotape a girls' basketball game when I was in 10th grade. I met the producer, a fellow by the name of Roy Menton, and I said, "Do you need an announcer?" He just had the cameras. They were going to film the game, and he said, "Sure." So I volunteered, clipped the microphone on.
Just like that.
Called this game, got his business card after the game, and went on to call hundreds of games the next 3 years in high school, all over Long Island in every sport imaginable. And I felt so fortunate. I had a 3-year head start on anybody else that wanted to do it in college because I gained this experience during my high school years. Went to NYU, worked for the radio station. There were 5 or 6 of us who wanted to do sports. We were all friends. It was a Division III program.
Not big profile.
Not big profile, but they did very well at the Division III level. And I felt that as opposed to going to another one of these great broadcast schools, and I have a lot of friends that did, and they've gotten tremendous jobs, but at NYU we were able to do everything right from the start, from our freshman year, whereas at some of the other colleges you wouldn't even get on the air until you were a junior or senior. So we did all the basketball games. My goal was to do hockey on the radio. That was it.
That was your favorite.
That was my goal.
You were going after it, though, man, which I give you a lot of credit. I mean, a lot of kids don't know what they're doing, what they're going to go after.
No.
You really went after it.
I knew. And I was fortunate.
Because that's not the sexiest work. I mean, it's not like there's a lot of people at those games. It's not like a lot of people are listening to those games. Right?
And sent tapes around everywhere, and very fortunate to get hired by the Baltimore Skipjacks. Do you have any Skipjacks paraphernalia?
I love the Skipjacks. Baltimore, I went to many skipjack games in the early 80s. I worked at Hyatt Regency in
There you go.
Baltimore. Lived in Baltimore from 81 to 84.
The gym at the Hyatt Regency in Baltimore, I was a terrible sales guy, but when I was hired as a broadcaster with the Skipjacks,
What years was this?
90 to 92.
Oh, I love
I had
the Skipjacks, man.
I had to do sponsorship sales. I had 3 successful sales. One of them was the gym at the Hyatt Regency.
Nice gym.
In Baltimore.
Yeah.
So for 2
is
years,
funny.
I'm the radio guy for the Skipjacks, but I had to do sales, marketing, public relations, but my main thing was radio. And to save money, minor league teams at the time would have the radio announcer room on the road with either the bus driver or the assistant coach. My road roommate with the Skipjacks was Barry Trotz, who just won a Stanley Cup with the
Oh,
Capitals.
my God.
Now the head coach of the Islanders. We were road roommates for 2 years with the Baltimore Skipjacks.
And it was so outrageous. Those games were crazy.
Do you remember the song every time they scored?
No, I don't remember. No.
I'm not going to sing it for you.
Okay.
But it was great. It was
And the old War Memorial right downtown,
yep,
right?
the
I mean,
old-
it was phenomenal.
That was my office for 2
I
years.
love those games. Picked up a seat for $5 right on
So when
center
you were
ice.
there, they were probably the Penguins affiliate.
Yes, they were.
And
Yeah,
they were the Capitals by the time I got there.
Yeah,
But
they were Penguins.
Those 2 years were unbelievable. Riding the bus,
Yeah.
10-hour bus rides to Portland, Maine. Just
Do
getting.
you love broadcasting more than you want to be a broadcaster?
You know what? I love not only broadcasting, but I love the preparation that goes into it.
You had something in your briefcase. You don't mind pulling that out? I mean, I just think it's unbelievable. I don't know if people realize the work that goes into getting ready for a
Well,
game.
for an NFL game,
Okay.
and again, I've been doing the NFL now for 25 years.
Is that your?
which
Is that
hard
the
to
biggest?
believe.
Is that? I mean, that's a big opportunity, big crowds, big listening
It's
audience.
definitely the biggest audiences. I worked a couple of playoff games that went to 40 million people. So, yeah, that's
big.
definitely the biggest audience. So, at the beginning of the week, I have a stack up to here of articles and statistics and various publications that I go through. And then Friday and Saturday, you go in, you have meetings with players and coaches and get to watch practice. By the end of the week, I have it down on 4 sheets like this. This is the Miami Dolphins offense from a game about 15 years ago. So I'll have offense, defense, flip it around, the opposing offense and defense, but it's all on here. You probably only used 5% of this because you have to let the game dictate, but you have to do the work. You
Is
have
this
to do the
a
research.
whole week's worth of work? So when you do a game on a Sunday, people think, "Wow, what a great job!" You probably go in on a Saturday and you do the game Sunday.
Start Monday morning with the research.
It's a whole week's worth of work.
You're watching prior games. You're doing a lot of reading. You know, I haven't necessarily read a lot of books, novels in the last 15, 20 years, but I probably do the equivalent. I probably read the equivalent of 5 to 10 books every week with all the research
articles.
we do.
A little easier now. At least you go get it online.
Right.
When you first started,
When I first started,
You're
we
scrapping.
had a fax machine. They were faxing us articles.
Right.
They were sending us VHS tapes to watch. Now you can watch any
everything
game live.
online. Probably a lot
This is the
easier.
hockey sheet.
wow, this
We
is
have
unbelievable.
baseball, basketball. But it's all, again, the preparation. That's what I learned growing
Yeah.
up. That's the number one key.
I always think about. You ever remember the Flintstones when they had Kazoo?
Yep.
It's like, I wish I was, and people always say, I wish I was in your business, brand. I wish I was like, don't wish too hard for you. There's nothing that does a lot of work doesn't go behind.
Right. The great thing about what I do, and you probably
Yeah.
feel the same way, there's a lot of work that goes into it. There's a lot of travel. I think the first time we met was on a plane coming home from Boston.
Oh,
from
yeah.
the Yankee Red Sox. game.
Yeah. It was
There's a lot of work. There's a lot
Yeah.
of travel. But I never feel like I'm going to work. It's fun.
Yeah,
it's
it's
fun
fun.
work. Sometimes you don't like the 6 a.m. flights, but it's fun work. We're watching sports. We're talking about sports. You're accumulating unbelievable sports paraphernalia.
There's a lot of stuff here.
It doesn't feel like work most of the time.
Who does it make a difference who you work with, and who's some of your favorites that you've worked with?
I might hold the record, actually, for the most analysts. Fox put out a list a couple of years ago. Between football, hockey, basketball, and baseball, I've worked with about 300.
Really? So,
Analysts in
so
various
you'd rather
sports.
work with the same, I would imagine.
And
Or-
you have your regulars. For example, in hockey, I've worked the Rangers with Dave Maloney on the radio
Yeah,
for 13
forever.
years, one of the best. But then on TV, whether it's Eddie Olczyk, Joe Micheletti, Pierre Maguire, Brian Boucher, work with a lot of different guys on
Who's
the
your favorite?
network side.
Who's your favorite football guy to work
Well,
with?
the one game, and I love them all, and my regular guys on Fox, I don't want to leave anybody out.
Yeah.
I went Ron Pitts, Anthony Munoz, Brian Baldinger, Tim Green, Darryl Johnston, and Tony Siragusa together for 8 years.
That must have been fun.
It was great memories, and now Rondé Barber.
Is
And
it
we have
hard?
Tiki some games as well.
But is it hard to do the football just because you're not like with the other games so close to it and you're really watching on a monitor, you're watching what you could see, and there's so much pressure to get the call right?
I'm pretty much watching the field. You watch the monitor during replays. Hockey, we're high up.
Yeah, you're high up.
That's the one where you're furthest away from the playing surface. The one game, though, that stands out in my mind that was probably the most fun, a Sugar Bowl, Notre Dame LSU. My partners were Howie Long and Terry Bradshaw.
Wow.
Who never usually do games. That was the only game Howie's ever done. He's usually in the studio. Terry had done NFL games for CBS many years prior, but they brought him out of the studio.
What was that like?
It was unbelievable. And we had some rehearsals. We traveled around the country doing some rehearsal games off monitors, and I had to go to wherever they were.
Of course.
During those weeks when they did the studio show on the road. But that was a memorable night. It was
What
about
stood
10
out?
11 years ago.
What stood out about Terry and what stood out about him?
What stood out about both were, again, the preparation. You might not expect it. They're in the studio once a week. How much prep do they have to do? They were all in on this. And they were going to practices, meeting with coaches, and they just picked up things so quickly. And Terry has one of the sharpest minds out there. I've been around him a little bit at Fox seminars through the years, but working that one game with him, and both guys, they just have these personalities where you get drawn to them. And Tony Siragusa is the same way, working with him for 8
Can't get
years.
enough.
Just a great personality, tremendous with people, whether in airports, restaurants, just so nice. They sign every autograph, take every picture. But that was probably the one game. Now, I've worked with Troy Aikman. I've worked with Tim McCarver, some of the greats in the other sports. Get to work with Walt Clyde Frazier, 20 games a year. He's the same way. I've never seen him turn down an autograph, turn down a
So
photo.
humble.
Yeah.
And
he
so
really
happy
is.
to see his Clyde Pumas back, my favorite
Yeah,
sneaker.
absolutely.
How great is that?
Have you been to his restaurant?
Of course. Been to his restaurant, Clyde's on 10th Avenue in the 30s. But also the Pumas, I have a pair of blue Clyde Pumas in my closet still to this day. I don't wear them just to remind me because as a kid, that was
Clyde's
the
been
sneaker.
brought back as the
They
national
brought him back.
spokesman. But
That's
to
great.
get
Yeah.
to work, 20 games a year with Clyde.
It's cool.
17 games a year with Rondé Barber, who will
So the
probably
underlying
go into the Hall of
component
Fame.
is hard work preparation. But you don't see that.
That's
You
the
don't
key.
know.
Right.
I just
Some
always
people
think there's somebody in
probably
your
think
ear.
you show up at 12:59 on a Sunday. Someone is in our ear. The producer's in our ear telling us when to go to commercial, what graphics coming up. But as far as the information, a lot of it is the work that you did on your own during the week.
Your favorite big game?
What, that I've worked or that I've
That
been
you've
to?
worked.
That I've worked. There's a couple. It's hard to narrow it down to one. I've worked 5 Stanley Cup finals for NHL radio, including the Rangers in '94. I wasn't working for the Garden yet, but I did call the game in '94, Game
Wow.
7
Wow.
for NHL radio. In football,
I like the way you're starting that, by the way.
in
My
football-
favorite game of all time.
in football, it would have to be a couple of the playoff games I worked, divisional playoffs. There was a San Francisco-New Orleans game. Drew Brees, Alex Smith, 4 touchdowns in the last 4 minutes, back and forth. Did work one Super Bowl for the international TV feed. It was the last Giants-Patriots in Indianapolis. So that wasn't seen in the U.S.
Yeah, that was a great
But
game.
it was seen internationally, so I have to put that up there. In baseball, a couple. The Jose Bautista bat flip, the playoff game.
Yeah.
I worked that game.
Oh, you worked that game?
Blue Jays in Toronto against Texas. So that was a memorable game. Also, I was the sideline reporter. I didn't do the play-by-play, but I was the sideline reporter and did the post-game interviews in the clubhouse, both 03-04, Yankees-Red Sox.
How is that, though? And it must have been amazing to be in the middle of that, all that, the up and down of that. I mean, literally the up and down of that. But how is doing the sideline? Is it a step back? Because you hear different things from reporters
Right.
that they get.
I was excited to do it because I wasn't supposed to be involved in that series.
Okay, so
Joe
you were
Buck,
happy- you were
Joe
happy-
Buck and Tim McCarver, the play-by-play in color, so I wasn't supposed to be there. So
You were happy to be involved.
I was
You're
happy
you
to
got
be
that
involved.
call.
And a couple of stories. So I never saw the Aaron Boone home run. Part of my duties were to do the post-game interviews in the winning clubhouse. So once it went past the 9th inning, I had to be close to run into the winning clubhouse. So I'm down in the bowels of the old Yankee Stadium with an earpiece, listening to Joe and Tim, watching on a black and white monitor with some policemen who were down there. And the game was in delay, both in my ear and on the monitor. So I hear the roar of the crowd before I knew what happened. And then you hear and see the Boone home run. I run into the Yankee clubhouse. I almost get trampled by some of the clubhouse workers who are running out to celebrate with the team. They're going the other way. I'm going in. But what I remember the most about that night was, and I've told this story before, the mayor, Michael Bloomberg at the time, was standing to the side of the podium. Now remember, it was an extra inning game, Yankees-Red Sox, so it probably went over
was
4
late.
hours.
Yep.
It started at 8:30. The game doesn't end until about 1 in the morning.
It was late.
So we do the clubhouse interviews, and at this point, Fox has to get to the late local news. It's like 1:15 a.m. I see the mayor out of the corner of my eye standing there wanting to be interviewed. I assumed that he was going to come up and
not the most sports knowledgeable guy.
Well, what happened
which he
was
admits.
I threw it back to Joe and Tim upstairs. They threw it to the late local news. So we were off. The broadcast was done. Young PR person with the mayor comes over to me and whispers, "Would you mind interviewing the mayor?" I said, "I'd love to, but we're off the air." He says, "Can you fake it?" He didn't want to lose his job. So I asked the cameraman to look into the camera, make it seem like we're recording this. Mayor comes up. I didn't want him to think it was live. I said, "This is on tape." Okay. We do the interview for 5 minutes, ask him about growing up in Boston. His mom's still a Red Sox fan. He's the mayor of New York, Yankees, Red Sox. We go on for 5 minutes. I saved the job, I think, of the PR person who was with him, but I don't think the mayor ever knew that nobody saw the interview.
Yeah, and nobody ever got that interview. But that must have been very special to be in that locker room that night.
It was.
It was one of those moments. I think almost too big a moment because it probably hurt us.
And then I was in the Red Sox clubhouse the next year interviewing those guys. So I got to experience both sides of it.
That must have been quite a scene. What do you remember out of that Red Sox locker room?
I remember when Larry Lucchino and Terry Francona, when they came up, and Mrs. Autry's there with the trophy, the American League trophy. And that was the year Larry Lucchino had referred to the Yankees as the evil empire. And I think my first question, it wasn't really a question, it was more of a statement. On national TV, I said, "Larry, you just defeated the evil empire." And then he went on to answer the question. What I remember more about that night was after I was done, I went out to the field just to see what was going on. Again, it was like 1 a.m., and Derek Lowe and some of the other Red Sox, they were celebrating out on the mound. It was almost sacrilegious, right, for the Red Sox to be celebrating on the mound.
And they had no trouble doing it. I mean,
Right.
in every sense, I didn't come out for batting practice that night. You know, a whole bunch of
And
things.
this was before camera phones, so I couldn't take pictures of it. I'm sure others did. But I'll remember that more than anything. It's just the celebration that was taking place and knowing you were part of history, a team that had come back from three down, and I was involved in doing those interviews post-game.
That was some night when you think about it. It really changed everything for them and in a lot of ways for the Yankees too.
Yeah, it really did.
Right? It really changed. And what a bunch of characters on that team.
Absolutely. And
which is really what we've come to find out from Ortiz,
and,
Millar, Lowe.
You mentioned Millar. You asked about partners. I've had the opportunity to work with so many guys. Kevin Millar, I worked a couple of games with.
Character.
Now's on the MLB Network. So it's fun. I worked games with Joe Girardi before he was Yankee manager. He did some Fox games. I worked a game with Paul Molitor, a Hall of Famer. I mentioned Troy Aikman earlier, John Davidson in hockey. So
is it special, like, with back to the Ranger thing for a minute, because I know it's your favorite sport, but is it favorite going into the most famous arena and doing those games? It's still, you still get that kind of buzz?
You do, yeah.
'Cause I still get that buzz walking into Madison Square Garden. Even though I'm 58, I've been to so many games. It's like, wow, this place.
Yeah, absolutely. My favorite, when I get asked about other sports, Fenway, Wrigley, Yankee Stadium, of course, Lambeau Field, Soldier Field, but Madison Square Garden still, every time you walk in, you look at the pictures, the history. They have so many photos up of Ali fights and the circus and
hard
concerts.
Is it hard for you to be impartial though? Like, do you struggle with that sometimes?
Not really, just because of my training, I guess. And
you know better.
Obviously, when you work for MSG, you want the Rangers to win, you want the Knicks to win. The better they do, the better it is for you. You get to work playoff games.
Are you able to kind of slide that a little that way? Like JD when he did the games, like he didn't have a problem with saying, "Hey, I'm rooting for the Rangers."
But you still give credit to the other team when you have to.
Yeah.
So it's not really an issue. When you call a national game, you have to adjust a little bit, call it down the middle. But no, it's still special walking into the Garden, looking up at the iconic ceiling, and now working the games from what's called the Chase Bridge. It's a great location for hockey.
Liking it?
You're high up, but you look right down on the ice. So it's.
What's the hardest part of your job? What's the most difficult thing about doing these games?
That's a good question. Probably the 6 a.m. flights, which I don't have too often, but maybe 5 or 10 times a year.
Because you're working back to back.
Sometimes with back to back.
You got a hockey game.
Oftentimes you fly the day before in a perfect world, but sometimes if I have a back to back, I might have a Ranger home game one night and a Knicks game in Indianapolis the next day. So
Because you're not flying with the team a lot of times because of this.
oftentimes I do, but in some of the back-to-back situations, working both teams, then you're not. You're traveling on your own.
Is it fun flying? You know, I've never flown with a team other than with Syracuse, but when you're flying with a team, are you able to
My
kind
daughter's at Syracuse now, by the way.
Oh, really? Newhouse? I
Newhouse.
assume, yes. So
Newhouse.
smart kid. Love the Cuse and love the orange. Everybody knows I bleed orange.
See the helmet right
Yeah,
there?
I'm a big orange fan, and I love Newhouse. But is it
Did you go
hard?
there?
I went to Syracuse,
Did you go
not
to Syracuse?
Newhouse. I never would have gotten there, but I went to business school and very grateful.
I wore a very expensive pair of Syracuse shorts yesterday.
You did.
It did not come with the tuition,
Oh.
but I bought it right around the same time I paid the first bill.
I can help you with some Syracuse apparel. I've got a little excess.
I
in
might
my
take you
house.
up on that
I'm
offer.
gonna have to get your address. We'll send you some stuff. Are you feeling like I forgot what I was
Oh, traveling with the team?
Yeah, traveling with the team. Do you feel like you get a little bit of a feel when you're traveling with the players, or is it kind of off limits?
You know what you get a feel? You get a feel for what they go through as far as getting into a city at 3 a.m. and then having to play a game the next day. I don't know how they do it sometimes. You know, we're not really sitting with them. The broadcast crew and the production crew, we're sort of in the back of the plane.
But the smarter players, do they work their way up to you to kind of because they want to promote something or they want to get to know you better, so you, knowing that that's a better play for them?
You know, you mentioned JD. When Wayne Gretzky was on the Rangers, and he's one of my all-time favorite athletes and favorite people. You won't find a more down-to-earth guy as a superstar athlete than Wayne Gretzky. When
We're looking forward. We're doing an event with him next month.
Nice.
Yeah, in the city. We're
Send
looking
my
forward to
regards
it.
for sure. But when he was on the Rangers, it was well known that he didn't like to fly. He hated flying. And at that time, the broadcasters, we sat towards the front of the plane with the trainers. And Wayne, during those 3 years, he liked to keep himself distracted on flights, not think about what was going on in the cockpit, et cetera, if there was some turbulence. JD was so well respected around the game. Wayne would actually come up and sit with us and talk to JD. We were just the innocent bystanders who got to listen into the conversations.
Yeah, and I'm sure it was always a good
But
conversation.
It was great,
right?
and it wasn't always about sports. It was about life. It was about other subjects. But you know, getting to be a part of that, those Wayne Gretzky, John Davidson
what do you
conversations.
take away from that Messier Gretzky? You know, back in the mid '90s, what hits you is
Oh, I mean, I was a kid then, and
two of
just
the greatest of all time on the ice.
Watching those Edmonton teams in the early '80s, you know, the Islander dynasty kind of set the tone. The Edmonton guys talked about the fact that they learned so much from the Islanders, winning 19 straight series, and then Edmonton won 4 and 5 years. They lost in '86 on the fluke.
They remind me of
on the fluke
Golden
goal.
State in basketball in a
Yeah,
lot of ways. When
absolutely.
they all of a sudden be whoop whoop, and all of a sudden, you know what happened? They were up by 3 goals.
And these days, you couldn't keep that team together
No,
with
no
salaries.
way. No way.
But and then getting the opportunity to watch Mark Messier play with the Rangers and call his games, and then that one year they were together in New York in '96, '97,
yeah.
and they went to the conference final. They lost to the Flyers.
Yeah,
who
I
were probably
remember
the better
Lindros.
team.
Remember that
Lindros,
oh,
Leclerc.
God.
Rangers had a lot of injuries then, but that was fun. Gretzky had a hat trick against Florida in the first round.
Oh,
and
that
then
was amazing,
They beat
wasn't
the
it?
Devils in the second round, and that was, you know, unfortunately, it was only 1 year together with the Rangers.
I remember going to those games and really saying to myself, Brandon, do not watch this game. Just watch Gretzky and Mess.
Yes.
Because you're not going to see that for that much longer, and that's magic.
And one of the
That's special.
stories Gretzky told, and he would always set up behind the net. That was known as his office. And he once told the story that when he was a kid, his dad, Walter, would have him take a white piece of oak tag, bigger than this. They would watch Hockey Night in Canada. And Walter told Wayne, I want you to draw everywhere the puck goes when you're watching this game. And there were a lot more spots and lines in certain areas of the ice. And that's one of the ways that he learned where to go. Because he would always go somewhere before the puck got there. And a big part of it was his dad having him draw during the game everywhere the puck would go. He would just know that those
There's
are the
certain
areas,
spots.
certain spots.
You want to take your. Yeah,
and I'm surprised
smart.
more guys haven't done that.
Smart.
Because
He's
it worked
such
so
a
well for him.
smart, high hockey IQ to say the least.
You know, you look at his numbers.
Oh, it's insane.
It was really he and Babe Ruth. No one else has been in their class. When you look at their numbers at the time compared to what everybody else was doing. In baseball, they have this stat now: the WAR, the wins above replacement. If you looked at Gretzky's stats compared to the next guy, just incredible.
It's incredible. And
More
that's,
assists.
and that's with clutching, grabbing, and everything else.
Until recently, more assists than anyone else had points. If he didn't score a goal, he still would have been the all-time leading point scorer.
He was a great teammate too, and that was amazing.
was,
And
yeah.
you know, for a star like that, worked harder than anybody on the ice.
Gretzky, Messier, Glenn Anderson, Yari
Yeah.
Curry, Paul Coffey, Grant Fuhr, one of the greatest teams of all time.
Amazing what they had going on at Edmonton. And we missed a lot of it here on the East Coast, which
Yeah.
is a shame. But whenever they would come in, it really amazed
It was a
me.
spectacle
Yeah.
because you couldn't
Yeah.
see their games on TV.
Yeah.
So it was an event. when they came into the Garden
Yeah, it
every
was
year
a
for
big
that
deal.
one game, celebrities would show up. It was a big event.
In closing, what's next for you? I mean, obviously you've hit a really high level here, NFL games, and it's hard to find regular work for a lot of broadcasters, and you've found your way. Is there a next level for you?
Well, I think I've been lucky again, as we talked about. I've worked the Super Bowl on the international side. I've worked the Stanley Cup on radio. I've gone to the conference finals on the TV side. I've worked baseball playoffs. So I think, obviously the big events are the pinnacle, the Super Bowl, the Stanley Cup. Those are the pinnacle of the business. Not a lot of guys get to work those. I've been around them.
Will
a
your
little bit.
daughters be following your footsteps?
So my daughter, who's at Syracuse now, probably behind the scenes. She's not looking to be on the air, at least
More
at
production.
this point. Production, PR, marketing, social media. She's doing an internship for the Red Bull soccer team this summer.
Nice.
On the PR side. Other daughter's in 10th grade, so we'll see what the future holds
Got
for
some
her.
time on that. So the tradition in some way will continue, and especially if you're in New York. I mean, it's a household name when you talk about listening to your sports from the Alberts. What's great is you could really do these games as we have seen, even Brett Musburger coming back.
Right.
Well, you got at least another 40 years left in your run.
I hope so.
Right?
You look at Vince Scully, worked
Yeah.
into his 80s. Brett Musburger, 79, coming back to do the Raiders. So,
That's
again,
cool. That's cool.
it never feels like work to me. So,
Yeah.
I'm sure
But, I
at
mean-
some point, you don't do as much as I'm doing now, but
Because sometimes I'll be at a game early and I see you guys. I'm like, wow, these guys. It's 2 hours before the game. You're here 3 hours before the game, and it's an hour or two after the game. It's a long day.
but we're also not in an office from 9 to 5 either.
Right,
We're
true.
at home. We're
But
doing
you're
our
preparing,
work. We're on
yeah.
our own preparing.
So you got some freedom.
But I get there early. I like to get to a game 2.5 or 3 hours early. You have that dream once in a while. You know how some people have the dream that they haven't taken a final in college? For me, it's that you forgot to go to the game, or you got to the game late, or you went to the wrong city. So fortunately, that hasn't happened yet.
That has not happened. Well, that's why getting there early is probably very important,
Exactly.
right? Man, because sometimes you get a little confused. Like, where am I in? Where am I? Where am I? What city am I in?
Now I started to take a photo on my phone of the room number, the hotel room, because once in a while you'll think back to yesterday's room number in a different hotel. So the
So
camera,
tough to be
camera
away
phones
from,
are
tough
very
to be away
valuable.
from your family a little bit there.
You know what? They're
Go ahead.
great about it. They're so used to it. My wife, when we first met, I wasn't traveling as much as I am now, but she's been great about it right from the start. We joke that we've been married 22 years, but I've only been there for 14. And my kids don't really know it any differently.
Yeah.
And again, they've gotten to come on some great trips as well. They came to the Olympics in Rio and in Vancouver and Pro Bowl in Hawaii. But sometimes when I'm home
some of
too
the
much,
benefits.
I'm
There's
a bit
some
of a
benefits.
distraction. So
That's true, too. All right, well, nice having you. Kenny Albert, legendary, especially in the New York area, and then you'll see him on the NFL games in the fall.
Giants
Obviously,
Jaguars week 1,
I love
MetLife
that.
Stadium.
I want to
With
get.
Rondé and Tiki.
I want to
There's a
get
scoop
to.
for you.
I want to get to a Jaguar game because I want to see Coughlin. I want to see Doug Marrone, but I don't know. Like Tiki with the Giant games, it's weird.
He did one with us last year.
Yeah, I caught that game. It was a little
against
weird.
Tampa Bay, but it looks like he's
finding more of a
got
happy medium.
Got
Yeah.
a relationship with the team now.
Yeah, it's better.
Pat Shurmur's welcomed
Yeah.
him back in. I think he's done some stuff with Saquon Barkley. He's a great guy.
So you got the opener. You got
have
the
the
opener.
opener.
Oh, Tiki was so popular.
He's a
in
great
it.
guy.
Oh,
And
God.
the game that I worked with Rondé and Tiki together.
I remember
last
that
year
game.
was-
Yeah,
it was fun. It was
not
fun.
a good game for the Giants,
No,
though. But it was a
but it was
nightmare.
fun to be with those
Yeah.
guys. But he'll be with us week 1.
That's cool. All right, continued success, my
Thanks,
friend.
Brandon.
Good to see you.